right, hi everybody, and welcome back to the Real Estate Flash with me, Barry Connerty, your local realtor, your local expert. I can be found at connerty.ca, CONNERTY.ca. I'll throw a link down there for you a little bit later. But let's talk about this week. This week in real estate has been actually a massive week with regards to developments. The government, the British Columbia government under David Eby, has introduced some ideas that they're going to put forward. Now, none of these ideas have been passed yet, but they do have a majority government, so we assume that they are going to get passed on Thursday when they put them in front of the legislation. So the legislation, rather, in front of the legislature. So the first one it's just huge. It's absolutely I can't even describe exactly how big it is. But the first one, they are going to eliminate the ability for stratas to restrict rentals. Now, if you're a strata owner, or if you've been in the market for stratas in the past, you understand how powerful this legislation really is. This is huge. Now I will say this is not a brand new concept. The Christy Clark government did introduce and pass legislation that got rid of rental restrictions for any buildings built, or any stratas rather, built after 2010. So it's already kind of out there right now, this type of idea, but to remove rental restrictions from all of the other buildings, we are talking about tens of thousands of units that are going to be coming basically online, and their strata rules are going to change. This is a very dramatic change. Now, David Eby used the number 2,900. He figures there's about 2,900 empty units out there that fall under restrictions for rentals. So they're basically just sitting empty because the owner's not living in them and they're not allowed to rent them out. So he figures those 2,900 will be able to come online almost immediately. But I mean, the bigger picture here is that there's probably tens of thousands, maybe 100,000, I don't know, like thousands and thousands of units out there that are being utilized without you're not allowed to rent them right now. So families make decisions based on that. Maybe they don't want to sell right now, but I don't want to buy another house and then have this one sit empty, so we're going to live in this unit. I mean, it really does change the market significantly. So, I mean, obviously the positives that you want to look at this one, if this is going to affect you in any way, here's some of the positives. I mean, you're going to see a lot more rentals come on board. Now, one of the arguments that kind of goes against that is a lot of people are saying, well, these units are all renting for $3,000, $4,000 a month, or $2,800 a month. Expensive rents anyways, so they're not really affordable. But I mean, when you start thinking about it, if you're going to increase the number of units out there, then in theory, anyways, I mean, we're going to have to see how it plays out. But in theory, that is going to reduce, how much any one particular landlord can charge. If there's a ton of other rentals out on the market, then obviously rental prices are going to come down. If that is, in fact, what does happen here. Like right now, the amount of rental pool out there is obviously constrained because of these strata rules. Now, normally you would have to get 3/4 of the strata of the building, the strata owners, to allow for the rentals and to change that rule. This just overrides all that. Now every unit that's out there is going to be able to be rented. So in theory, we hopefully will start seeing rental prices come down for stratas, at least anyways. I don't know if that's going to change rental prices for houses, but certainly for stratas, that's going to that's going to have a definite positive effect. The other one that's going to, the other bonus to this is that if you own a unit that has rental restrictions on it right now, this opens up the market for you if you wanted to sell it, so that, investors may come in and go, okay, well, I'll buy it now, because I can rent it out. I can make income off of the property. Now that's a good and a bad depending on how you sit. A lot of people feel that that's actually going to drive up prices, because if you have currently right now, if you have a strata unit and it allows rentals, they typically do sell for more money, because investors will come in and they can make income off of the property. So one school of thought is, again, that's going to just increase the price of the strata units all around, and maybe in the short term it may, but I think the reality is that we're talking tens and tens of thousands of units that are now just all just blanket everybody's allowed to rent. So that I don't think that that's going to be absorbed by all the investors out there. So again, I think very similar to what we were just talking about, or what I was just talking about with how the rental rates will come down. I think this will just even it out. I don't think that there's, maybe at first some of the units that were kind of like really nice units, and investors would love to get their hands on it if they allowed rentals. So now they'll kind of pick it up. But I think in the end, this just changes the whole scheme of things. And so there just won't be a difference between, a pricing per square foot for units that have rental restrictions and units that don't, because there just won't be any rental restrictions. So I think it's just going to become an even playing field in the end. Now, there's always transitional, things that happen that aren't so good. So you kind of got to watch how this plays out. We certainly are going to be watching it very carefully, because, this is absolutely massive news, and I think personally that it's going to be great, in the sense that people are going to be able to rent now much easier than they were in the past. They're going to be able to find rental spaces, and I think that's just, I can't say how fantastic that is. Especially with the price of everything right now, it's absolutely insane, and so Harold, I think it's great. Hopefully this is going to work out well. I know there's going to be some negatives with regards to the transition. There always is, and we're certainly going to follow up on that if we start seeing price spikes and stuff like that, and that hold. I think originally you might see some price breaks, but I think they're actually going to come down, and I think that's the thing to watch for, and that's the hope. And certainly, some people are out there saying that this is not a magic bullet and all that. And of course, it's not a magic. There is no magic bullet. Like any type of system that we're going to come up with that allows for the price of housing to actually come down, become more affordable for everybody, is going to have multiple, multiple causes. There's not going to be one thing that's just going to bring it all about. However, I do think that rental restrictions are going to help out the rental market. I don't know if it's going to help out the actual cost of the housing as far as purchasing your house, but it's certainly going to help out, bringing down the cost of rentals. How can it not? If you're going to throw out tens and tens of thousands more units available to rent, then that has to bring it down. So, kudos for David Evie. I mean, that's great. He's always been big on helping the downtrodden in certainly in East Vancouver and in Vancouver. So this goes right on to what his what he always campaigns on. So I think it's great that he's getting an opportunity here to show and to see if some of his ideas are gonna come forward. So let's see how that one goes. So rental restrictions are gone. So that's totally interesting. Now another big one. Now this is actually pretty big with regards to putting some housing stock into new markets, and that's taking away some of the age restrictions that stratas have. So the ones that are coming off are anything other than 55 plus, or I think probably 65 plus 2 will be able to stay. So anything 55 plus and over, it sounds like they're going to be able to keep, and anything that's an age restriction that's under 55 plus will be gone, and they will not be allowed to enforce it. It doesn't get erased off the books. I mean, just like lots of old laws that are out there, they don't actually go in and erase them. What they just say is they put a blanket, same with the rental restrictions, by the way, they just put a blanket legislation through that says that those are not to be allowed to be enforced, right? So age restrictions of 19 plus, Those are the popular. The popular ones are 19 plus and 45 plus. Those ones aren't going to be allowed. And it's kind of interesting actually. I remember when I got into real estate and I started selling these 19 plus, 45 plus units, and I had a couple of discussions with some lawyers, some interesting ones actually. And the thing that they said was that the 55 plus restriction had actually been tested in court. Like somebody had actually, gone through court to try to get rid of this restriction. And the judges, the judge at the Supreme Court of British Columbia upheld it. And they actually said that, no, that's actually a good restriction and it can be upheld. So that one's been actually tested in court. What was interesting, though, in their finding, and if you read the finding, I can't remember it verbatim, but interestingly enough, what the judge did say at that time was he brought up the 19 plus and the 45 plus one specifically and wrote that his judgment does not include that, and or at least I inferred from his writing that he didn't agree with 19 plus or 45 plus. So I always thought, and those ones have never been tested in court. So I've always thought that they may fall one day if somebody actually ever, brought it up in court or took it to court, because it is kind of prejudicial. I don't see how we could restrict somebody based on age. Like if you're allowed to own a property, I don't see how you can kick people out. I think it's very prejudicial anyways. And so it had never been tested in court. However, I will tell you that I've had clients that have had to sell their unit because they were in it, they bought it, as adults, and then they had a baby. And when the wife got pregnant, they got their notice. Like, that's it. You guys have to go. And instead of fighting it in court, they just abide by it. They sold the unit. I sold it for them, and we bought them into another place. But can you imagine? Like, that's just the worst time. Like, it's just such a bad time. And now with housing shortage, especially the market that we just came through, certainly in this market it's a little bit easier to get a place, but the market that we just had, you could sell your place and then not ever find a place, or then you're out renting. So I think it's great. Get rid of the 19 plus, the 45 plus. I think they're silly. Now the 55 plus, because it's a retirement age, and the retirement community, as it should be allowed to be able to retire, in peace or whatever. Again, that one got upheld by the courts, and I think that's probably why EB didn't go after the 55 plus, is because the courts had already determined that those, that was a fine restriction. And again, they did make note of the other ones, and they did make note that they weren't, as rock solid of an idea anyways as the 55 plus. The one thing that is really interesting though, and I'd like to I'd like to know more, and I will be listening obviously on Thursday when they do pass the legislation and be able to read it, so we'll get more specifics then. But with regards to the 55 plus stratas that are out there, there's lots. A lot of them, if not most of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but certainly most of them have rental restrictions in that you can't rent. Now, you always can rent to your family, okay? That's a given, like your immediate family, that you can't restrict that anyways. And I think you always have to allow at least one rental. And there's always been a way to sort of fight it, like to appeal it, but most of them, especially in the 55 plus, they don't like rentals. Certainly, and I think we can kind of understand that right away. Like, they're trying to have a community of people who are retired and own their houses and stuff. But now with the rental restriction thing, that might go, and so that would be interesting. Now, you still have to be 55 plus to rent it, obviously, because that restriction would go whether or not you're a tenant or whether you're an owner. But to open up that market as well for retired or for people of that age or older, that's interesting. Anyways, I'm going to watch it. I don't know if they're going to take the rental restrictions away from 55 plus or not. That they didn't specifically mention that, but the legislation will probably mention it when it goes through. So we'll have an update on that. But it is something that we are going to be watching for. But again, you're talking about, there's thousands of these 19 plus 45 plus units out there, and so to open that up, and they typically sell for a little bit less money, but now that that restriction is gone, I don't see why there would be any reduction in the per square foot cost of these things now. But nonetheless, it does put a lot more out there for families, for young families. Or what it does really is it helps. If you're already in there, and say you're in your 20s or your 30s and you own one of these 19 plus units, now you don't have to move if you have a baby. And I mean, that in itself is, I still can't believe that they would ever make people do that. I used to get really upset when I'd hear about that. It just seems so ridiculous. I mean, it's your home, and now you got to sell it because you're having a baby. I always felt that was very prejudicial. Anyways, I'm not going to beat that dead horse. So those are the two really big ones that kind of are, he really honed in on a couple of issues that people have been talking about. I'm surprised he didn't bring up the pet thing, because I know in Ontario they dealt with the pet issue, and I'm always surprised that they didn't deal with the pet issue here, because there are lots of buildings that restrict pets, and in Ontario they got rid of that. So or not, they didn't get rid of it, but they altered it so that you are at least allowed to have a pet, right? Whereas you can't just have endless amounts of pets, but so there are some pet restrictions, but you were allowed to have a pet. Whereas here, that's still a thing, and I find it weird that he didn't bother doing it, since he's kind of opening up the legislation. But nonetheless, that's where we are. So the other big one doesn't deal with strata units specifically, but it's an interesting one in that he's going to introduce legislation that allows the provincial government to step in very easily and override municipal government's decisions, or just take them right out of the picture altogether with regards to development proposals. So what the aim of this is to do is to basically say to municipalities, look, if you're not passing enough of these development proposals to get houses built, then we're going to take you right out of the picture. The provincial government's taking you right out of the picture, and we're just going to fast track it, and we're just going to get it done. And that's it. So they're giving the municipality, they're not taking it away from them right away. They're sort of giving them the first right of refusal. Hey, okay, we understand that you guys want to plan your communities, and that's fair enough. That's kind of what you're there for. But if you're doing a poor job of getting these proposals, green lit, so that we can get more housing stock out there, then we're just going to come in, and we're not even going to care what your bylaws say and what your stance is, and we're just going to get these things done. Now, what that looks like in the end is that could go both ways. Like, I mean, I'm all for getting these proposals done, especially if it already conforms to what the municipality's OCP is. Like, if the municipality has an OCP and a project is fully conformed to that OCP with regards to setbacks and housing, density and all that kind of stuff, then really I don't understand why they would hold it up anyways. So that makes sense to just kind of get it through. The ones that would be interesting are the ones that sort of step outside of what the community has already agreed to as far as their community or their neighborhood plan. So if the density level is, say, 18 units per acre, or whatever it is, and then a developer comes in and says, well, look, you know what, we really want to put a 25 per acre unit development on this property, even though the OCP only allows for 17 or 18 units per acre. Now, if that's the holdup, and then the provincial government steps in and says, no, we're gonna pass it because it's a good pass, even though your OCP says different. That's when I think there might be some problems in regards to it. And So it will be interesting to see exactly how that goes. But it certainly puts a lot of power into the provincial government very easily. Now, the provincial government, in theory, already had that power anyway. They can just go in and they can make legislation anytime they want, especially if they have a majority government. They can just say, no, we're going to do this. But this streamlines it. It actually, makes an office for somebody who's basically overlooking complaints that developers may have to the municipalities. And I know that some of these municipalities are really bad. Like here in the township of Langley, it's a solid 18 months, 2 years minimum if you want to get a development passed. I mean, that's a long time. If you go into the city of Langley, it's certainly way quicker than that, maybe 6 months or less. Vancouver is huge too. Like you're talking years to get it passed. They have to conform to all these things. And again, I know some municipalities are making these changes, and I think a lot of times if you go in and you simply just conform to what the OCP has, that really does speed the process up. But still, 18 months, 2 years. I mean, that's crazy. Like you're going through cycles of real estate markets at that point. So how are you as a developer supposed to plan properly if you think like, okay, today this is what the value of the house is, but we've just seen, like, if you started 2 years ago, based on that, lumber costs and everything, and now you're selling in this market, well, you're just not going to get this, per square foot value that you had. And so that time period of literally just sitting there waiting for the green light has killed your market. Like totally, like you're in a completely different market. Like basically these guys have to go right back to the drawing board if they want to get their dollar value out of it and start right from scratch. And I find that to be, look, you can say what you want about developers, or I know not everybody thinks that developers are great and everything, but the reality is that they're not going to build something if they're not going to make any money off of it. I mean, you're allowed to make money, and I don't think anybody should be gouging it or something, but at the same time, you're not going to build it at a loss. That's just not going to happen. And so that's what has happened when some of these municipalities have held back these permits, for 18 months. And there's a massive amount of costs. And if you want to discuss about the costs and stuff like that, I could easily I've got maybe some graphics I'll try to throw up, but there's a tremendous amount of costs and hoops that have to be jumped through in order for these buildings and these developments to get built. And so any time that you can cut back on the time of that, then I think it's great. So again, these are all interesting developments, and I'm really looking forward. Thursday's the day they're going to pass. They're going to introduce the legislation, so I'm told, so that they can get these passed before the fall. The fall committee ends. And everybody goes, for Christmas break or whatever these MLAs do. Christmas break that's 2 months long. But anyways, so looking forward to it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'm Barry Connerty. Get me at Connerty.ca. By all means, give me a call. Let's talk about these issues. I mean, these are big changes. And if you think that, or if you have any questions about it, hey, I'm here to answer. I'm here to look for the answers for you. And by all means, I'd love to talk to you. So Connerty.ca is where you get me. And that was your Real Estate Flash.